Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another action figure review, and today we'll be taking a look at the SH Figuarts Ultraman Nexus. Now this character comes from the 2004 television series Ultraman Nexus, and I really like Ultraman Nexus. It was so close to being my favorite Ultra show, but unfortunately the pacing in the show, specifically towards the end, feels a bit rushed, and that's not entirely the show's fault, you know, apparently the show did get screwed over by, like, the network that was airing it. Unfortunately, it did kind of have to, end early, so, everything was just kind of rushed towards the end, which is very unfortunate, because I feel like if it was, more fleshed out, I feel like it genuinely could have been, one of the best. And, again, I still really like Ultraman Nexus, but, again, what we got, the pacing towards the end still feels I don't know, it still feels pretty rushed, but when the show is good, it's really good. The writing in this show is particularly smart. I really like the darker approach to, the Ultraman formula here. I think that's really cool. This is like a sequel series to the movie Ultraman the Next, which I also really like, and it would be really cool if the Next got, the SH Figuarts treatment, but I digress. The soundtrack to the show is really good. The theme song alone goes absolutely crazy. And overall, Ultraman Nexus, again, the pacing issues towards the end, it's very noticeable, but still, I highly recommend you check out Ultraman Nexus because it is still a very good show. That being said, I have been rambling on for far too long. Let's just get into this. Like usual, to start, we'll take a look at the paint. And the painting on this figure, I think, looks really nice. So as you can see, most of this figure consists of a bunch of grays and blacks, which I think looks nice here. Everything is painted, very neatly. No, paint, blemishes or anything like that, or defects or nothing. Just a lot of really nice, neat painting here, on the back here, the bits of red here. Underneath this piece of transparent plastic, I think looks really nice. The color timer here is going to be painted red, as well as the bits here, as well as this blue bit right here as well. Going to the head here, we can see that his eyes are going to be painted white with some clear plastic on front to give the eyes more depth, which, under the right lighting, I think it looks nice, but when doing photography, I think it can look a little not perfect, but still, the eyes here still look really nice. These bits are going to be transparent pieces of plastic as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the painting on this figure. And overall, painting on this figure, I think looks really nice. So the painting here, I'd say gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the articulation. And the articulation on this figure, I think, is solid. So the base of the head here is on a very limited ball joint, but he can look up about that far. He could probably look up further, but unfortunately his head crest does get in the way. So unfortunately he can't really look up all the way, but still, he can look up and down a little bit. We have a nice ball joint at the base of the neck, so he can look even further down. And about that much going up. These shoulders are going to be, we're going to see some butterfly joints here so they can move forward like so. Post-recording Zack here. So there are a few things here that I didn't really go into too much detail with as far as the articulation goes. For starters, usually with SH Figuarts Ultraman figures, there's usually a swivel right here at the shoulder here, but this figure does not have that. Instead, what this figure has, there's a swivel at the base of the joint here, so you can move it outwards. Like so. The elbow joint here can move 360 degrees. And I just completely glossed over this part. So on the calves here, these can extend outwards like so. I forget exactly why, what the purpose of these were. And I tried looking it up, and I couldn't really find anything specific, at least for this form of Ultraman Nexus. So, yeah, so these can move out and that's just something they can do. Very minor, so it's, probably why I glossed over them, like, initially, but still, I just wanted to point out that, these can come out, and just all the joints in the, arms here that I didn't go into great detail with initially. On with the review! The arms can move outwards like so. We have a double bend in the elbows here. And the wrists are on ball joints. The upper torso is going to be on a ball joint, as well as the lower torso. The legs can kick forward about that much, and backwards about that much. Nexus can spread like so. Double bend in the knees. We have an ankle pivot here. The feet can move downwards like so and upwards. And lastly, we have a toe bend in both feet. And that's pretty much it for the articulation on this figure. And it's pretty average as far as SH Figuarts Ultraman figures go. Suffice to say, it's not bad. The articulation here I do think is nice, but we've definitely seen this before. Again, the head crest here does get in the way of Nexus being able to look up all the way. I mean, he can still look up fine, but, like, he could probably look up just slightly more if it wasn't for this head crest here. But I digress. Still, the articulation on this figure, I think, is very solid. So the articulation here, I'd say gets a pass. Now going back to the figure itself, we'll now talk about the sculpt, and the sculpting on this figure, I think looks really nice. I think this does a really nice job, representing how Ultraman Nexus looked in the show. I think proportion-wise, I think everything here looks great. Nothing looks too big or too small or too out of place here. And again, just to reiterate, I do think that, this is as close as we're going to get. I mean, like, obviously with, like, the articulation and all that, like, some parts of the sculpt might, like, suffer a little bit, like the back of the legs here, like, very visible joints here. But, like, that's, like, not a problem at all because, like, how else is this figure supposed to move? But regardless, the sculpting on this figure, I still think looks very nice. So the sculpting on this figure, I'd say definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the detailing. And the detailing on this figure, I think looks really nice. So the thing with the Ultras here, I've mentioned this before, but there's not really a lot as far as, like, textures go. For the most part, they are, like, typically, like, smooth compared to, like, Godzilla or Gamera, who, like, have a lot of, like, scales and stuff like that. But this design, I can see, like, there are a lot of, like, ridges and stuff, like, on the torso here, and even on the legs here, that I think looks really nice here, and even, like, on the legs here. On the arms here, just a lot of really nice detailing as well, The chest here is obviously going to have a lot of really nice detailing here. The color timer, I think, is detailed nicely. Going to the head here, the ears, I think, are detailed nicely, as well as everything else here, including the mouth. And these little bits right here, now, I don't really know what the official reason is, like, in the show, like, for what these, like, specifically do. But I do know that, and this is just my headcanon, crocodilians have, like, these little black dots all over their jaws to help them, like, detect, like, motion in the water. And I feel like this is kind of like that, because, Ultraman Nexus is hunting for prey in the water, of course. But, yeah, that's just my little headcanon there. But anyway, going back to the figure itself, yeah, the detailing here is right nice. You get, like, some nice detailing here. There's not really a whole lot to say. Again, there's not, as far as, like, detailing goes, there's not really a lot to say compared to, like, Godzilla or Gamera. There's still some nice detailing here. Like, again, like, on the torso here, like, these little bits here are detailed nicely, as well as on the legs. And everything on, like, the, forearms here, I think, are detailed really nicely. But still, there's not really a whole lot to say, but the detailing on this figure, I still think looks really nice. So, the detailing on this figure, I'd say gets a pass. Now, we'll do some size comparisons. To start, here we have the Bandai Ultra Hero series, Ultraman Nexus. Here we have the SH Figuarts Ultraman Gaia, which is my favorite Ultra show. Sorry, Nexus. Here we have the SH Figuarts Ultraman Mebius. And of course, here we have some hand sanitizer. And here we have Dr. Billy Grant. So at the end of the day, should you get this figure? I'd say yes. I think the painting here looks really nice. I think the articulation's nice. The sculpting, the detailing, everything here looks good and feels good. The accessories that this figure comes with, I mean, it's basic as far as SH Figuarts Ultraman figures go, but still, like, it is nice to have a figure that comes with a good amount of accessories like this figure. And overall, this is a nice figure, and I do recommend that you pick this one up. As far as price tags go, I got this figure from Hobby Link Japan, and I paid a little over $50 before shipping, of course, which is not a bad deal at all, considering that I've paid, like, around, like, $70 and even, like, $90 for, like, SH Figuarts, like, Ultraman figures. You know, paying, like, $50, like, $6 for this figure before shipping is not a bad deal at all. But again, with Hobby Link Japan, I did have to import this figure, so I definitely paid a little over $50. I paid closer to like $80 or $90 with like shipping and all that, which, you know, it's a little steeper, but still, like, import fees, like, if we're taking that out of the equation, then, like, you know, a little over $50 is not a bad price tag at all. But again, keep in mind that if you do decide to import this figure, just know, like, the import fees are going to be a bit high. Not, like, crazy expensive or anything like that, but, like, it's definitely going to add to the price of this figure. If you're looking for a US release, I know Big Bad Toy Store has this figure up for pre-order, and they are selling that figure for $90, which, a little steep. It's slightly cheaper to import this figure, so if you do want to get this figure, I'd say import it. But if you just want just a simple, just like US release, then, you know, there are sites like Big Bad Toy Store. You know, I believe this figure is available for pre-order on eNight Media as well, and probably a bunch of other online retailers. But, you know, from what I've seen, I know for a fact that this figure is available for pre-order on Big Bad Toy Store. But again, if you want this figure and you want it for a slightly cheaper price than what the, you know, retail prices here in the US, then I'd say just import this figure. That being said, that is it for today.